Hello, everybody. Welcome. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, welcome and good evening. My name is Maddie from Mad DIY Marketing, and I want to thank you so much for joining us for this episode, Options for Financing Your Food Business. This episode is a part of the Digital Shelf series, a series created in collaboration with Fund 17, Propeller, the Recirculating Farms Coalition, Food Policy Advisory Committee, and Mad DIY Marketing. We created this series to bring food businesses together to discuss how we can adjust and adapt to a more digital shelf space that COVID-19 has placed us in. Tonight, we will be discussing a bit of information. The inspiration behind this episode is to discuss the more alternative financing options for you as a food business. We won't be going into detail on bank loans or business loans in the more traditional sense, but do remember that these are also options that you have. The partner organizations have a wide network, so if this is a funding option that you are interested in learning more about, please let me know at the end of this webinar, and I am 100% happy to introduce you and lead you in the right direction. So just a few housekeeping items before we begin. Please remember to keep your microphones on mute. This episode is being recorded for later use, so please be aware of this. And we will be having a Q&A session at the end of this episode. So please hold your questions until the end, and I promise we will get them answered. We will also be putting up a poll on the screen very shortly. This poll helps us meet some criteria for our series, A series sponsor. And we really appreciate it if you take a few seconds to get this poll filled out. There will also be another poll at the end of this webinar episode. So if you could please also take a few seconds to fill out that poll, it would be greatly appreciated. All right, well, I have checked off all the housekeeping lists, so let's get started. Miranda.
Hi, I'm Miranda. I'm a capital access intern with Fund 17, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about venture capital funding and crowdfunding with the Kiva platform. So I will share my screen. Okay, is this good for everybody? Okay, so I'm gonna start off with just a quick definition of venture capital funding. So venture capital funding is a form of funding where firms and or individuals finance the growth of small companies to aid in their growth and hopefully profit from their investment. So firms will finance companies in return for an equity stake in the company, and financing will take place in rounds. So that's, of course, very basic. And I'll talk a little more about the rounds and types of venture capital funding in a minute. Okay, so how does it work? So first of all, a very important aspect of venture capital funding is finding the right VC firm or investor for your business. So of course, since this webinar is targeted towards food businesses, it would be very good for your business to specifically look for VC firms and investors that are often investing in those kinds of industries. So there are actually a lot of websites and resources that you can use to find investors in specific industries. So websites like Crunchbase, CB Insights, and also PitchBook all have options where you can go in and filter investors by industry. So for a food business, you might search for, of course, like food technology, restaurants, food and beverage, food trucks. And yeah, hopefully you would find a local VC firm or investor that is specifically looking to invest in food businesses. So once you find the right investor, you would want to set up an introductory call or meeting. So your introductory call or meeting would be where you just introduce your business and give the company a better idea of just what you're about, what you're looking to do. So yeah, during this initial meeting, you would be presenting a pitch deck. So I feel that people probably have heard of pitch decks a little bit before, just in whatever context, but your pitch deck should basically include aspects like your management team, market pain points and solutions. So places in your industry that you feel could be possibly more efficient, or just don't have the right solutions yet, and then how your business will provide those solutions. Also, you will want to include things like company progress and your company financials, which will essentially just prove to a VC firm that you are worthy of investment. And then, of course, your investment amount that you would like, just to give the investors a good idea of what you are looking for, really. So that there are definitely a lot of other small details that are necessary to have a good pitch deck. Those are just some main things. Other things include really looking for your target customers and your target market. And yeah, of course, including real data from current companies, like people who would be your competitors if you were to grow your business into that industry. So yeah, those are some things you would want in a good pitch deck. And then if an investor is interested in your company and basically is satisfied with your pitch, they would provide a term sheet. So a term sheet is basically a list of terms that are going to kind of govern your relationship with the VC. So a term sheet might include things like, let's see, the poll results. So a term sheet might include things like, of course, financial guidelines for the investment, how much money a VC might be willing to invest, how much it might want from your company in return. It also might include things about your corporate governance. So that would be how your company is distributed between founders and investors. So they just have a better idea of how your company works. And then, of course, things that might happen in the possibility that your company grows very large and you might be liquidating or exiting the market. So that would be far in the future, but it's just basic terms that the investors and you want to make clear before going any further. So once a term sheet is provided, the company would enter the due diligence process with your company. So essentially the due diligence process is where a VC firm or an angel investor will go through your finances and just general business information to determine the amount of risk they might be taking on from investing in your company. So many sources of advice for entrepreneurs seeking VC funding suggest that you be fairly upfront with anything that might signal risk to VC firms, so you can have a good explanation for it and be a little more proactive rather than have them find out during the due diligence process and force you to explain it. So that's just a necessary process. And yeah, it's just something to know about because it does involve a lot of financial statements, like profit data and everything like that. So supposing that a company clears the due diligence process, the firm and or angel investor would make their proposal. So this would include the amount of investment they're willing to provide and the equity stake they would like in return. So of course, that is how they would make their profit, because if your company grows very large, then they get that larger equity stake. So that is essentially the process. Of course, there's many little contract details and things like that, but yes, that's the basic process. So now I'll move on to defining the funding rounds. So the pre-seed round is essentially a very, very early business. So it would be the concept stage where you have the general concept of a product that you are providing or a service. So you might just have a prototype of your product, or you might have your plan. Basically, you have a concept for what you want to do and what you want funded. And this would generally be a lower amount of money, mainly for starting to make your product and actually kind of launching your business. So a step above that is the seed round, where you would already have a slightly more established business, and the funding would mainly go towards starting to grow and starting to market towards your customer base. So slightly more developed than a pre-seed round. And then Series A and Series B follow the same trend. So for Series A and Series B, it would be for growing your company even further, possibly expanding into new products, things like that. And that would generally be once a company has become larger and has a bigger customer base. And then finally, there's the IPO, or initial public offering. So this is companies like Apple and Google, where anyone can invest just on the stock market, essentially. So of course, much bigger companies. So yeah, those are the initial rounds. Most small businesses would be in pre-seed or a seed round. Okay. So some types of venture capital that would be specifically good for small businesses and of course food businesses are, so first of all, angel investors are just wealthy individuals, and they can be especially helpful for small and very niche businesses because they might be most interested in looking for local companies that fit their specific interests very well. So you could definitely find angel investors in New Orleans who are specifically looking to possibly finance restaurant startups or something along those lines. And then that's how you would know that that would be a promising funding option for you. So angel investors also are, of course, individuals. So they have a little bit more freedom in what they invest in. So they would most likely be more willing to take on smaller businesses with a little bit less data to back up their profit and things like that. So then institutional VCs are larger firms. They have larger investment portfolios and tend to make larger investments in the companies that they invest in. So they would have a more rigorous process, since of course they're trying to keep a good appearing portfolio, and they of course have to go through multiple different people within their firm. So yeah, angel investors can be a little bit more flexible in what they want to invest in because it is only them making the decision. There are also some groups of angel investors. For example, I think it is New Orleans Angel Investors is a group, and there are many of those available where you can kind of just go online and find a collection of angel investors, essentially. So yeah, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but food businesses should look for VCs interested in industries like food processing, food delivery, food trucks, restaurants, catering, really anything to do with what your business is targeted towards. It could also be drinks, alcoholic beverages, anything that you are specifically working on. Okay, so let's see. Right. So, okay, that's my initial venture capital overview. Another thing I should probably mention is that businesses are most likely viable for VC funding when they have their founding team, a minimum viable product, and their assessment of customers and the market. So a minimum viable product could be, if you're working in kind of like a food technology business, possibly you have a prototype, something that is very close to being ready that you can provide to a VC to show that you have a viable product. And if it's a service, it can just be the equivalent, essentially showing that you have a service that you're going to be able to provide. And then VCs also like you to have a solid assessment of your customer base and then the market that you will be working in. So you would have to provide very detailed information on how you would reach the customers that you are planning to reach, how much those customers that are your target audience make up of the market you're working in, and then, of course, just analyzing how profitable that would be. So, of course, for example, if you were working in, I guess, spirits and alcoholic beverages, of course, you would only have the 21 and up customer base. So then that would be kind of how you would target that to reach that specific base. So that is what I have right now. I can also answer any questions if anyone has anything at the moment. Good? Okay.
Thank
so
you.
then, oh yes.
Perfect. So we can hold our questions at the end just for time's sake. We do have a few more types of funding avenues we'll walk y'all through. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah.
All right, again, hopefully y'all can see my screen. Okay, and so I get to have the wonderful job of introducing y'all to crowdfunding your food business. So just a little bit about me. I have a background in crowdfunding. I used to work with a company based out of San Francisco whose sole purpose was to help farmers, food producers, good food organizations raise money anywhere from $1,000 up to $15,000. I've helped farmers raise $25,000. I've helped consumer packaged goods raise anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000. And I've also helped farmers raise money to buy tractors. So crowdfunding your food business is possible and you can do it. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a little overview. What is it? Is it for my business, your business, some crowdfunding models, pros and cons of crowdfunding, the platforms that you might be aware of, and some you might not, and then also tips for crowdfunding success. So let's understand the basics of crowdfunding. It is a major way to fund and finance projects that are both large and small. And as a food business, you all know, unlike tech or software companies, it's very expensive to get your food business going. There's always a need for extra capital, if that's for obtaining food certifications or testing your product, packaging design and product design and testing, equipment, kitchen space, manufacturing, fulfillment, shipment. I mean, the list goes on. So crowdfunding is a wonderful option for you for any of those mentioned parts of your business plan. It's looked at as an alternative financing method and could be used throughout your business growth. It's just another way to look at marketing and selling your product, to be honest. So in the end, you're looking at something that's much more than raising funds though. You're bringing crowds, you're bringing customers, you're bringing friends, family, your community together around your business. Crowdfunding is an extension of you and your product or your restaurant into the online space. So it's important to note that most crowdfunding sites will encourage rewards for your backers. These rewards incentivize for individuals to give at specific funding levels, and they're typically your products or a service that are offered at these various levels. So a question you should be asking yourself, is it right for your business? I'm gonna go ahead and say yes, it is. You know, there are two things that you really need to consider before well, there's many things you need to consider. We'll get into that. But you have a strong following. That's either in your hometown, in your region, in your state, or digitally. You're involved with a successful e-commerce platform or a marketplace, or you're sold through Thrive Market and you have, you know, more people who know about you across the country than at your home, which I highly doubt. But hey, it's possible. So know and gather those people, you have your strong following, and then you're trying to attain something that's tangible. You need to purchase new equipment or machinery. You want to expand your product. You want new packaging. You're a restaurant or cafe and you're looking to raise funds for a new retail space. Really, again, there is no limit. So some pros and cons really quickly. Pros of crowdfunding is great for growing your brand awareness and gaining national following, especially with the platforms that are available. Wonderful product feedback. I know some of you have probably had to pull teeth, for lack of a better term, to get feedback on your product from customers, if that's either through your demos or in-store demos to grocery buyers. You get product feedback from potentially hundreds and thousands of people at once. And you typically don't have to repay the funds that are raised. And to point out, for rewards-based projects only. And then a few cons. It can be costly. Always prepare a budget. Always try to stay within the budget. But you know, things do come up and you need to be prepared for that. It's extremely time consuming. It's estimated and that you would spend around 15 to 20 hours a week just on your crowdfunding project alone. And another con is unrealistic expectations. I've had to talk farmers and food producers and even good food organizations down from their start goal. There are numbers to look at, you know, when you're setting your funding goals. You look at, you know, your social media following. How many people are on your email list? Who are your partners? Who are your collaborators? And then you can divide that by multiply that by an average give, and you're able to give yourself a roundabout number that is achievable based on your current community. So unrealistic expectations are something that do happen, and they are, you know, you need to be aware of that going in. Of course, you want to be the unicorn project on Kickstarter. We all would love that, but you need to go into crowdfunding with a realistic goal. So some crowdfunding models. So I'm going to go through 3 right now. There are fixed, which is all or nothing. If you don't raise your funding amount, you don't get any money. There's the flexible funding model, where you will receive a portion, you will receive exactly what you've raised, even if you don't hit your goal. And then there's equity. Equity is a new type of crowdfunding, and Miranda will also get into another new type of crowdfunding related to this. Equity crowdfunding got started in around 2012, so it's fairly new. With the Title II of the Jobs Act, equity crowdfunding allows businesses to advertise the sale of a portion of your business on the internet. So that essentially means you're selling ownership in return for a minimum investment amount. And it's typically to accredited investors, which just means that they have $1 million in assets, and also to consumers. You know, as long as you can meet that minimum investment amount, you can then fund this type of crowdfunding project. So we're gonna start off with the one that everybody knows about, Kickstarter. It's a rewards-based crowdfunding platform. Just so you know, food projects make up only 4% of the overall successful projects. That's not a bad number. It does receive the highest traffic. It is the most recognizable because it is the longest standing crowdfunding platform. But again, that doesn't mean that you're gonna be able to raise successfully on Kickstarter. It's all about preparation. They use the all or nothing model. So if you don't reach your funding goal, you leave with $0. And their average raise on Kickstarter is $25,000. It's good to know that the fees going into these crowdfunding platforms, there are fees. Kickstarter's is 5% plus credit card processing fees. Crowdfunding platforms are using third-party softwares to process each and every credit card or debit card transaction, so those will be on top of the platform fees. I put Kickstarter as a high-risk investment because not only are you investing a lot of time and energy and effort, but if you don't reach your funding goal, you walk away with no money. So high-risk investment there. I included Rebel ice cream as an example on the slide. You will be getting these slides at the end of this episode, so I highly recommend checking out Rebel and others, but they are a nationally known ice cream brand, and they raised successfully on Kickstarter. All right, Indiegogo. Indiegogo is also a rewards-based platform. Oh, I do want to mention one thing that I should say about Kickstarter. One of the main differences between Kickstarter and Indiegogo is that Kickstarter requires you as a business, as a food business, you have to have a fully functional prototype. So keep that in mind when you're looking at researching the different crowdfunding platforms. You must have a tangible product. Oh, I didn't finish Indiegogo. Okay, so Indiegogo, the average raise on this platform is $41,634. It's the highest of any platform. They have the most active live projects, which means that you can go there and find more at any time than any other crowdfunding platform. They're they conceal a lot of their data. So in finding some of these numbers, it wasn't as easy as it was for Kickstarter. But they operate on the flexible funding model. So you will still receive any pledge money, even if you aren't fully funded. It's worth noting that Indiegogo does give you the ability to do a fixed funding as well. So as a food business, as the project owner, you have the opportunity to control which one you want to do. And to let you in on a little secret, fixed funding models typically work better if you think about a group of people wanting to be involved or wanting to get their hands on this innovative, delicious, trending CPG product. Having 30 days to get in to be one of the first funders of this awesome new product expansion really feeds into that funding model. So something to think about. On Indiegogo, as mentioned, products can be conceptual. You do not need a prototype. Their fees are pretty low, 4% plus credit card processing fees. And it's worth noting, if you do not raise your funded amount, they do increase that commission fee to a higher rate. I do believe it's 9%, but would have to go back and double check that one. And again, I would say that Indiegogo would be a low risk investment. If you put a lot of time, energy, and effort into this crowdfunding campaign, you can still walk away with money that was pledged to you. Indiegogo is also really great if you are a 501c3 designation food company, farm organization, or anything like that. They do offer 25% discount on the platform fees. So that's something that's really cool about that platform. All right, so Circle Up. As mentioned, equity crowdfunding began in around 2012, and they're still developing the laws and regulations around it. But Circle Up is an early stage consumer fund. It's wonderful for CPG companies. It's an investment marketplace that provides capital to innovative early stage consumer brands, and it connects you to these accredited investors. They use the equity model, so you are selling part of your business to investors at a minimum amount. They do require that you have at least $500,000 in business revenue, and that you would be raising 1 to 10 million in the growth equity. So those, of course, you would want to navigate the Indiegogo and Kickstarter prior to any equity. They do have high fees, a 5% commission fee, and if this is a fit for your food business and where you are, it is actually a low investment risk because Circle Up has an amazing community. They provide you with the data, trends, and consumer market insights. They have partnerships with some phenomenal bigger companies, e-commerce marketplace, and they have an industry-wide network. So they connect you with entrepreneurs who have raised through their platform before. So it would be, a wonderful community to be a part of. And then one more, it's not as well known as some of those other crowdfunding platforms, but I think it's worth mentioning, especially if you're a brick and mortar. Credibles is a company that's out of San Francisco. Arno Hess, who is the founder, he's very involved with Slow Money, amazing, brilliant, and he started Credibles, which is essentially prepaid crowdfunding model. It uses the reward style setup for customers who are avid shoppers at your brick and mortar or at your cafe, or say if you're a farmer and you offer CSAs, or you're a baker and you have CSBs and you have these packaged products. It utilizes that reward style setup so that you can get the money up front from your customers and they prepay to then use these credibles at your business. Their fees come in because they use an app, the Credibles app, or on site, and they do collect a 5% transaction fee. And it is a low investment risk. You do need to, as a business, market and let your customers know that this is an option for them to pay for your business, for your product, for your service. But again, it is wonderful for you as a crowdfunding method because you get that $250 up front that they would be spending at your business regardless. So that is Credibles. And now we're just going to talk a little bit about crowdfunding. Overall, crowdfunding projects have an average of 47 backers. So mentioned earlier, you want to use real numbers to help you shape your crowdfunding campaign. The average pledge for a crowdfunding project is $88. So you know that you have a community of X number of people. You can use these numbers to help shape your funding goal. Again, crowdfunding, you can choose the model that works best for your business, but going in with as much information planned and scheduled as you can is only going to benefit you, your time, your project overall. A little more insight, friends and family are going to be your biggest supports. As entrepreneurs, I think you already know that that is the case, but even in a crowdfunding project, they will also. And email marketing has the highest conversion percentage. So if you are not using email, I would highly recommend getting a newsletter or some sort of email communications going with a list prior to launching a crowdfunding platform. There's a wonderful resource that I included at the end of this presentation that you'll have access to, and it shares with you a lot of crowdfunding statistics that are really helpful in terms of getting into the nitty-gritty details of if you share on Twitter, you're likely to raise X amount of percent from your community. So they're really helpful. So I included that in the end. All right, so start with rewards-based crowdfunding first. Equity is, you have to have a certain amount of business revenue, so it makes sense to kind of go in that path. It's also really important since equity crowdfunding is quite new. States can develop their own equity crowdfunding rules, so look into the state laws and regulations surrounding this model of where you live, because it can be different. And also research. Look into the platforms diligently and make sure that you are choosing a platform that is best for your business. And these are just some, tips. Preparation is key, absolutely. Talk to businesses who have done it in the past. Get creative with your marketing, create a buzz, use those more traditional, ads alongside of some creative collaboration campaign. Devise a weekly marketing plan. literally organize every single step of your campaign. It will help you down the road. Budget. You need to be asking yourself the questions of how much funding am I going to need to raise for this specific, part of my business plan. Factor in fees, shipping, development, processing. There are things that will come up, so make sure you have a good understanding of how you're going to allocate your funds. This is a very time-consuming fundraising option, but so worth it. It is a full-time job for 30 days. And when you launch loudly. There is campaigns that raise at least 30% of their goal within the first week are more likely to see their campaign through successfully. Sell your story, get personal, have at least 10 backers scheduled for your first day of your launch. Really, really prepare for that. And thank every single donor personally. It really comes in handy, and people love it. So overview, research and prepare, which model makes sense for where you're at in your business, and talk to businesses who have done it before. You will learn so much from them and their experience. Thank you so much, y'all, for this. It was a lot of fun to revisit my past. Crowdfunding is such a wonderful avenue for food businesses, especially, and farmers. So thanks so much for listening. These resources will be included when we send this over, and I'm happy to talk more about crowdfunding at a later date if you're interested in that. All right, and Miranda's actually going to take us into another crowdfunding model. Oh, maybe it looks like we lost her. Okay, so until she joins, for sake of time, I do have a few other areas of funding that I can talk about. One of them is grants. So Antonio Alonso, he is the executive director of Fund 17, who is a partner of this digital shelf series, has pulled together a really great presentation, kind of giving an overview of available grants right now. But I see that Miranda's back, so since the close of her presentation is crowdfunding, I would love to kind of have her continue on the crowdfunding route. So take it away.
Great, thank you. Yeah, sorry about that. My Wi-Fi just cut out for a moment. Okay, sharing my screen. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the Kiva crowdfunding platform specifically. So this is essentially a fixed model of crowdfunding in that entrepreneurs have to raise the amount that they are approved for, or they won't get their funding. However, I will go over that in more detail. Kiva definitely has some interesting ins and outs. So initially, of course, Kiva is an online crowdfunding platform, and they use social underwriting instead of credit to determine loan amounts and how they approve applications. So Kiva can be a really good option for small businesses and entrepreneurs who don't have great credit history, or entrepreneurs who may not have a lot of loan experience in the past. So it is ideal for people who might be worried about credit as a factor in getting traditional funding. So social underwriting with Kiva essentially means that Kiva will use people from your network supporting you to determine if you're a trustworthy borrower. So Kiva provides zero interest loans, and they have a very flexible repayment rate, and they are overall a very flexible platform. So in order to make sure that they're having people lend to trustworthy borrowers, they have borrowers actually go through 2 different fundraising periods. So the timeline for Kiva essentially is the application, which entrepreneurs will fill out and supposedly get approved. The application includes their loan ask, what they will be using their loan for, their personal story, so a personal story relating to their business that basically just allows lenders to better connect with them, and of course, very detailed financing information such as previous debts, debts unpaid, employees working at a business. There are quite a few things that Kiva would like included in the application. But essentially, once an application is approved, the borrower will go into the private fundraising period. So in the private fundraising period, a borrower will find lenders from their own private network, and those lenders will be lending the borrower a minimum of $25 initially. So once an entrepreneur is approved for their application, they have about 15 days to find a specified amount of private lenders, and they must find that amount of private lenders or their loan will expire and they will not be able to move onto the public fundraising period. So supposing that a borrower does pass this private fundraising period, they will move into public fundraising, which is a lot more like many different crowdfunding platforms that Maddie already mentioned. So the Kiva page for a borrower will be public on their website, and anyone can at that point lend to them. So essentially, Kiva uses the system of private fundraising to build trust with their borrowers, since they aren't using credit as a form of keeping the entrepreneurs accountable. They instead are using social underwriting, so entrepreneurs have a little more incentive to pay back the loans. So that is why they are able to do zero interest loans and not base their loan amounts off of credit. So some other basic information about Kiva. Currently, $15,000 is the maximum loan amount provided. It used to be $10,000, however, they increased it to $15,000 since during COVID-19 isolation and quarantine, they are allowing entrepreneurs to gain more funding just as extra support. So Kiva can really vary in loan amount. So loan terms can also range from 6 to 36 months. So if, for example, someone was getting a loan of $4,000 to $5,000, they might be paying it back in about a 6-month loan term range. However, if they're getting somewhere along the lines of a $10,000 to $15,000 loan, a 36-month loan term might be assigned to them. So Kiva Loans are repaid in monthly payments. So sometimes I think entrepreneurs can get a little bit confused by the way Kiva kind of like distributes their money. So just to be specific, the private fundraising period, when the entrepreneurs get their amount of private lenders, those private lenders will go towards their overall loan amount. So if someone has a $10,000 approved loan, and they gain $5,000 from their private network, then they only have to crowdfund $5,000 more from public fundraising. So it essentially adds up throughout the periods. So if a Kiva loan doesn't make it through the private fundraising period, the loan will expire. And if they make it through private but don't manage to crowdfund the full loan during the public fundraising period, their loan will also expire. So in that way, it is somewhat fixed because entrepreneurs do have to raise that amount. So yeah, I also have some examples of entrepreneurs who have worked with Fund 17. And these people are both in the food industry. So Desmond is the owner of Fitbit Nutrition. He crowdfunded a loan of $5,500 on Kiva. And Jamie Gooden is the owner of Damn Good Cuisine. She crowdfunded a loan of $6,000. I worked with both of these people when they were consulting on trying to start a Kiva loan. And Fund 17 also works with Kiva because we are a trustee. So we actually endorse both Desmond and Jamie on their Kiva pages. So having a company endorsement on Kiva is another kind of significant way to show trust, that show that the borrower is trustworthy. It shows that they have a company backing them and helping them with financial support and things like that. So of course we do have different terms for agreeing to endorse a loan, but that is a service that Fund 17 provides. So, sorry about that. So yeah, these are some examples of people who have been successful in the food business on Kiva. The food business does make up a large portion of Kiva, especially since it is mainly targeted towards small businesses that need microloans. So of course, it is possible to get 10,000 to 15,000 on Kiva. However, we often point out to entrepreneurs that it's very possible that they should apply for a higher amount than they want, because it's common that people will be approved for a lower amount. And of course, there are options. If you don't want to go through with your loan amount, you can let it expire, and then you can always reapply for Kiva. Let's see. So another important aspect about Kiva is that the repayment period is very flexible, so that also makes it very convenient for entrepreneurs who may be worried about, for example, paying a loan back very quickly because of a high interest rate. So since Kiva has that low interest rate, it allows borrowers to space out their repayments in the time that they need. And also it gives them a little time to get back on track if they happen to fall off of that schedule. This is a very interesting aspect about Kiva. They actually essentially have a disclaimer to lenders that if a borrower needs to default on a loan, they should consider it a loss, essentially. So it does end up being very flexible for entrepreneurs. Of course, it's never a good idea to default, but that is an aspect of Kiva that makes it a little bit more, a little bit less strict. And also just, it doesn't involve credit as much. I know some places do credit reporting. However, Fund 17 does not credit report with Kiva. But yeah, so I also have the workbook that I use when I have meetings with entrepreneurs, and this is what I show them to kind of introduce them to the application. So it's kind of long, but I can go through that very quickly. Okay, so this is my Kiva workbook. So this just outlines the Kiva application timeline. So private fundraising period, that will be up to 15 days. Then public fundraising, one will have about a month. Okay, and this is my Kiva application checklist. You can see that there's quite a bit here. General business information, business verification. This is just basic Kiva things. So yeah, the application is also made of a personal and business information section and your personal profile. So that just gives lenders a chance to get to know the borrower. Yes, so lots of information about financials, crafting a narrative. So these are all just aspects of the Kiva application that are fairly important. Personal story. Yeah, I've already explained the private fundraising process. And yeah. Okay, I think that's about it for Kiva. I'll hand it back to Maddie. I think you're muted, Maddie.
I was muted. That's such a Zoom. Anyways, so in the time of COVID, you know, there are options that have opened up to food businesses that might not have always been there in the past. So something that I do want to go over is grants. So grants have become available for food businesses very recently. Usually grants are for nonprofits. However, in the light of the global pandemic that we are going through, many of these are now opened up to businesses that are not nonprofits and that have been in existence since this happened. There has been a high demand for these types of funding. They're often competitive and short-lived. So many grants are quickly expiring and they are becoming increasingly harder to find. We wanted to walk through a few that are available right now, you know, while they're still here. And the term non-dilutive refers to a grant as opposed to funding that dilutes ownerships to investors or lenders, as some of the models that we've talked about earlier. So there is the Louisiana Main Street Recovery Grant Program that's going on right now, $15,000 grants for businesses, flexible on the meaning of Main Street business. If you have an office or a place where you interacted with customers, you may be eligible. It's framed as a reimbursement, just as the PPP loan is, to cover COVID-19 expenses and damages. It does require tax documentation, and the eligibility requirements may eventually be relaxed because there are a lot of undistributed funds. This will be given to you to check out, but more info can be found on their website, nlsbdc.org. And then Business Grants for All, powered by Hello Alice, is also $15,000 for COVID-19 relief. And you can get up to $50,000 for growth grants. Most grants, needs to be noted that most grants awarded through this option will be $10,000. It is more competitive than Louisiana Main Street Recovery Grants, but application requirements are less challenging. And we provided the link for you to check that out as well. And then the Catalyst Fund, the Roddenberry Foundation, are $15,000 grants for new projects that have a social change vision, competitive process, looking for big ideas, bold visions. But what's unique about this one is it's for new projects. So we thought it was worth mentioning for y'all to check out because food businesses are covered in this. So there are additional resources. Fund 17 has done a wonderful job at creating a COVID-19 resource page on their website. I Fund Women is 10K grants and 2K grants for women-run businesses. Get the Bag funding is phenomenal. I highly recommend you checking out this wonderful resource that Get the Bag has created. They break down each and every type of business that you could be involved in and show you all the available funding opportunities that exist within that industry. And covidcap.com also is a wonderful resource as well. So really quickly, just because I, did do some extra, this is options for you to finance your food business. I wanted to just mention accelerator programs and incubators. There are so many across the country. Some of them are location-based. Some of them are, specifically for the region. Some of them are international, but just accelerators they help expedite the growth of existing companies with a minimum viable project. An MVP that was mentioned earlier as well. Incubators and accelerators, they help food startups and small food businesses. They provide you with capital investments, well-equipped commercial kitchen spaces at times, access to networking and classes, packaging, distribution support, and consulting services. Locally here in New Orleans, we have Edible Enterprises and Norco, and we have Propeller as an accelerator program, which is phenomenal. Propeller is a 4-month program where they do work with food businesses that are improving food access and equity, as well as food service businesses that are pivoting to a consumer packaged good. So I just wanted to show a few that are out there around the country. There's a lot of them in major cities, but some of these accelerator programs are open to food businesses applying from anywhere in the United States. You have Chobani, which is a highly competitive food incubator, but it's a 4-month program and they provide you $25,000 grants. You also have, the Good Food Biz Accelerator in Chicago. They're a 6-month fellowship program and they prioritize local and organic foods. San Francisco is wonderful with Terra and Kitchen Town. They're an incubator and they also have a yearly accelerator program where their applications open in the summer for anyone to apply to be a part of their program. So again, this is just a list of some of them that are available. And again, accelerators and incubators are wonderful, wonderful communities for food businesses to be involved in. I know locally there's, I saw Eric was on, we have the Bywater Truck Kitchen and, some of these amazing community building spaces that are of service to food businesses here in New Orleans. And I know there are some works to provide some more of a space for food businesses here locally. Another resource just to think about are virtual pitches as a food business. You get a allotted amount of time and you can pitch to investors, VCs, credited, the whole gamut through Food Bites Virtual Pitch 2020. And then there's also an amazing Real Food MBA is a wonderful resource. And they have a great list of startup pitch competitions that you as a food business can join. And some of the research resources that I used for this were the Real Food MBA and Collab Tree blog to help kind of pull together these accelerator and incubator style, options for you as a food business that, when you're ready, when you're there to look into. They're really great. All right, so we are at the end of our time. Actually, we are at 7. So we would love to open up the floor to y'all if you would like to ask us any questions. So you can go ahead and put yourself off mute and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And also, in the meantime, we do have a poll that we would love for you just to take a few seconds to refill out. It helps us with one of our sponsors for this series, and it is the similar questions you will notice, but if you could just take a few minutes to fill this out, it would be greatly appreciated, and it would really help us out. So I've launched that. You'll see it on your screen.
Hey, this is Eric with the Trap Kitchen.
Hey.
How's it going? That was great. Thank y'all for all those great options to look at. I was wondering if y'all had kind of a recommendations on like starting places to start getting kind of your books in order, whether it's, just starting to put everything in Quicken or, hiring an accountant. Like what are some of the basic steps that could get you, started to start applying to any of these?
Miranda, do you have any suggestions there?
I know for Kiva specifically, one initial step is to have separated personal and business finances. Of course, that's a pretty basic step, but that is required for them. Some other documentation that they would like, and I'm sure venture capitalist firms would also like, are things like your profit margin. So of course, keeping track maybe in, really any organizational platform that works for you, spreadsheets, Microsoft, wherever, keeping track of your profits and your customers. Of course, just, yeah, I think having separated business and finance, personal and business finances is a pretty initial starting step. And then moving on to keeping track of profits, debts your company might owe, possibly also anything you're just keeping inventory, anything you're spending on your capital, such as equipment and employees. Of course, I personally haven't run a small business before, but I feel that just keeping track of all of those things separately, especially how much you're paying your employees, how much you're paying yourself, those things are all good to have a record of. And then, yeah, basically keeping it all in order with the separated personal business finances, which I think can sometimes be an initial step for very small businesses. Yeah, that's all I have right now.
And I'll just chime in on that too, really quickly. There are a lot, for instance, equity crowdfunding will be very explicit on what you need to provide. For the reward-based crowdfunding, you don't need to provide any financials or anything along those lines. But I know just working with Fund 17, we have, as Miranda is working as a finance intern, there are business case managers who are very who are very skilled and have a lot of knowledge in helping businesses set up profit and loss statements. And QuickBooks, I know, is super helpful for tracking all that stuff as well.
Hey, I have a question. This is Katie and Kevin from Crooked Johnson.
Hello.
Hi. So my question is, I guess just, what is important right now with, should small companies obtain a website, or because of the options of social media platforms, is it really necessary right now in the beginning stages, or is it something we should be working on, or should we just utilize what social media can provide us?
I have an answer. Oh, go ahead, Maddie.
You go for it.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think, especially now with, of course, the presence of social media marketing, I think it's very useful to have every platform you possibly could utilize. I think, for example, you might be using social media as best you can, but it can also be very helpful if you have a link in your, let's say, Instagram or Facebook description biography, if you have a link to your own personal website so people can see just a very focused look onto your business. I think also just personally, when I'm looking at especially a food business, I would say I do like to see a website that you can kind of look at and just further understand the business. I think it is a very good idea to have your personal website in addition to your social media. That's all.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that, especially now with consumers shifting a focus of in-person shopping and feeling comfortable, going out and doing what, retail runs or farmers markets even, those things are not done, but there has been a huge increase in e-commerce and digital stores success. So I would encourage, getting one launched and playing around with what that looks like and developing and starting an online presence through that type of commerce, because it will benefit you down the road. Depending on whichever funding avenue that we've talked about, if you were to go in any of these paths, having people who are already supporting you, who having a following, you know, you're able to show potential investors, or you know, that you do have people talking about your product. There is a need, it is innovative, it is pushing on the trends, it is inspiring. They want to see that your customers are feeling that from your business. So having a digital presence is really important. And if you're able to, in terms of capital, have e-commerce, I know there's fulfillment and shipping and even marketing that goes into operating a store, I would definitely suggest doing it.
I have another little thing to add actually as well. Just being in my early 20s, I know a lot of people in my demographic specifically will actually use platforms such as Instagram or other social medias as kind of a way to find interesting looking food businesses, mainly because it is such a good way to pull people in just visually. So yeah, that's definitely the way a lot of my peers specifically will start putting their attention on a specific place if it has a particular social media presence. So yeah, that's just a specifically good way to get a like early 20, younger even demographic interested in your business.
Thank you. I have another question, but I'll let someone else ask so I don't take up all the time.
Go for it.
My next question is as far as shipping, you know, all these companies out here that provide that service for small businesses, and some probably are, you know, more, you know, appropriate for like bigger companies, but for small companies, would it make sense to like, you know, have one of these services, you know, take part in your shipping, or would it just be better to do it yourself in the beginning processes without all those, you know, avoiding all those fees and whatever they have attached to their service?
So I can say, just from experience with working with New Orleans beverage company, that we do the shipping ourselves, we do the delivery ourselves, because we're only doing local fulfillment. So I would say, you know, it really depends on where you are in your business. We are actually going to be hosting an episode through the digital shelf about emerging local markets. And we'll have Marianne from the Recirculating Farms Coalition, and Connor from Top Box Foods Louisiana, and a Fund 17 recent graduate called Bypass Lines, who will be discussing kind of these alternative ways to get your product out into these emerging markets that are separate from CSA. So I would recommend joining us for that, to kind of pick their brains kind of on these logistical questions. But I would say, if you're only doing local fulfillment, the delivery yourself makes the most sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, are there any more questions? Again, the poll's still up, so if you haven't filled out the poll, it'd be greatly appreciated, very much so. So I just want to thank y'all for coming and joining us here tonight for the options for financing your food business. We really appreciate you, and we still have 6 episodes left of the digital shelf space. So please check out our landing page. I will follow up with that link. And if you haven't signed up for any of our remaining episodes, please do. And if you do have any questions that come up after this episode, I'm more than happy to answer those questions or direct them to somebody who can. All right, well, thank y'all so much, and I hope you all have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Alrighty. I think how did you feel about that?
Felt pretty good. Sometimes I have a little public speaking nerves, so I wasn't sure if my pacing was normal seeming. I hope it seemed normal on your end.
Yeah, you did great. You did really wonderful. And all your information was really clear and really well thought out. So thank you so much for joining and being a part of this. I'm super grateful. I know Fund 17 was so happy to have you here and for them to be represented through you.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Miranda. And if you are wanting to use this down the road, it will be recorded, or we do have a recording of it. So
it's great to know. Thank you.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you later and feel better.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Good evening. Good night.